Hello and welcome to FPL Mate, your best mate for fantasy Premier League content for the 2021-22 season. My name is Dan, and in this video, I want to talk to you guys about a lot of the thinking behind my personal decision making, the stuff I don't want to bore you with, I guess, in my general videos, and I want to show you why picking the right players in FPL isn't entirely down to luck and that anyone can do it. And hopefully by the end of this video, you will have a crucial tool that will help, that will basically make you the envy of your mini league. I'm going to help you guys to try and win your mini league by kind of changing your thinking and adopting a certain style of thinking, I guess, and hopefully this is just going to turn you into a point predicting sage. I hope. But yeah, if you do enjoy this video, guys, please do leave a like, please do subscribe, and yeah, basically I just hope I can help you out a little bit, guys, with this kind of in-depth video. So first of all, is this the video title, is it clickbait? I don't think it is, because I genuinely think I do have an answer to this, to the question of how do I win my mini league, right? And to me, the answer is really simple. Pick the most popular players before they become popular players, and that's kind of all there is to it. We're going to talk about strategy and structure, team structure, chips. We'll do all of that in other videos, but I think this basic principle is the first and most important key to FPL success, being ahead of the game. I think that's huge. So I'm going to show you some examples of this and try and explain how you can do this yourself. And just to warn you, I'm going to be using my own FPL picks as examples throughout this video, just because it's easiest. Obviously, I understand my own Russia now and have easy access to my own notes and my own data and stuff like that. So this video, please do not think this video is a look at me, all of my picks are great, because those of you who have watched me for a while, you will know that this season I have had many failed picks. It doesn't always go right. So just to name a few: Kane and Bumo, Armstrong, Mahrez. There's been some bad ones, guys. There's been some bad ones, but I think if you get half right and kind of cut your losses quickly on the other half, the ones that go wrong, and without being too proud, that's going to be good enough. So, the point is you have to at least try. If you don't buy a ticket, you can't win the raffle after all. But in this video, we are going to focus on the ones that have worked out, because I think that they're just good examples of how, how you can pick good players, I guess. So let's give an example of why it's so important to pick players up before they bang. And this is it's a pretty extreme example, but I think it sums it up pretty well. So here in game week 8, I played my wildcard. This is the team I ended up with. And in this wildcard team, I tried to pick the players that I thought would perform in the future, rather than players I thought had already performed in the past, or at least have a balance of the two kind of schools of thought. I didn't look at points gained in the past. I didn't look at the most popular players. I didn't follow advice on Twitter or YouTube to see what others were doing. Don't get me wrong, Twitter, YouTube, Reddit, the advice there can be really helpful, but blindly copying others can kind of lead you into some real traps. And what we see on FPL social media a lot of times is bandwagons, and when a few people suggest a player, suddenly it kind of snowballs a little bit. More and more people are copying, using the same player, and by the end of the chain, nobody really remembers why they were picking this player in the first place. So bandwagons, they are often traps, and the key to getting ahead of the game is the willingness to be a little bit different. So in my wildcard team, you can see some players, you probably look at them and think, these are real template picks, Dan. These are real template picks, right? But at the time, they weren't. When you look at this team, I picked James, who, at the time he was owned by just 2% of players. Foden was at 1%. Ramsdale, I think, was about 4%. These at the time were considered strange, odd FPL picks. Like, why are you picking these players? But I picked them up because I had a little bit of faith that they could do well. Some of the others, don't get me wrong, I got wrong. You can't get them all right. Mahrez, Lukaku, for example, turned out to be really bad picks. But, I tried to go for some different players who I thought could do okay. But you don't have to get them all right. And that's the key part of this strategy. We'll speak about that properly, a little bit later on in the video. But being willing to put your neck on the line, that's what it's all about, really. Now, looking at these scores in this particular game week when I did play on my wildcard, it looks like my picks were kind of average. It looked like they weren't such great picks after all. But FPL is not just played in one game week, and you have to remember that as well. Skip to game week 9, and whoa mama, Reece James and Phil Foden explode at a time where they were still only owned by 1 to 2% of FPL players. Now, I gained these massive point hauls at a time where nobody else is gaining them. Ramsdale is still failing at this point as well, but we know what happened since then as well. go to game week 10 and we got another huge Reece James haul. But for this week, his ownership has doubled. More and more people are gaining points alongside me. You know, they're gaining points with me. So the points I've gained from James this week are actually less valuable than they were in the previous game week. After this haul, from Reece James, almost 1 million people brought in James into their FPL team. So any points scored after this game week are even less valuable because everyone else is gaining those points too. So you can kind of see what I'm trying to say here. It's all well and good getting FPL points, but the thing that will put you at the top is getting those points when nobody else is getting them, or at least, very few other people are getting those points. Ideally, you want to pick players before they score any big hauls, because big hauls cause a lot of people to buy players, but really, it's more about getting on a player as early on in the trend as possible. The later you jump on a consistently high scoring player, the less valuable their high scores become. And also, the later you buy them, the closer they are to ending their run of form. Every week that goes by without you owning a huge scoring player is points lost. And every week you own a player in a situation where others don't is points gained. So this all sounds kind of simple, right? You know, just pick the players before they score big, or at least early on into their runs of form. But how do you actually do that? How do you know a player is going to score big before they score big? And I think there's actually 2 ways of doing that, and I'm going to explain each of them to you. So one proven method of predicting future points is not looking at past points, but instead looking at underlying stats. Now, I can't stress enough, don't let stats take over the management of your team. Using stats alone is really not a magic wand. And even those stats, you kind of have to use them in the right way as well. But let's give an example of where I use stats to bring in a player that not too many other people were talking about at the time. So in game week 17, I was looking to bring in a Man City attacker ahead of some really good fixtures. At the time, a lot of people were going for Bernardo Silva. He was the obvious pick. He was getting a lot of FPL points, was playing really great football, and seemed fairly nailed on as well. So I brought up a table on underlying stats over the previous 5 game weeks to see who was most likely to get FPL points. Great measures of players likely to get goals are things like expected goals, shots in the box, big chances. You can kind of see on screen right now. These are really good measures of when you think a player is likely to score goals in the future. They kind of show that the player is getting into good positions, their team is providing them with great chances, and they're obviously playing in a certain way, or in a certain position, or have a certain role in the team that is obviously tantamount to getting goals. If you're looking for assists, look at key passes, big chances created, and expected assists. They work really well as well. The thing is, when you're looking at these stats, is sometimes they will be different to actual output. When we kind of look at this kind of stuff, really, just because a player has scored a goal, it could have been a lucky goal, but if you're seeing a player taking a lot of shots, you can assume that if the player is a fairly good finisher, that some of those shots will go in, right? You know, it only takes a really good goalkeeper on the other end of the pitch to make stats, make the actual outcome look a lot worse than it actually is. You know, Sterling can take 10 shots in a game, and if the goalkeeper on the other end has an absolute worldy game, when you look at FPL points, you'll see Sterling with a 2-pointer. But if you look at the underlying stats, you'll see, oh my word, Sterling is taking so many shots. The goalkeeper may have had a worldy game, but the next game, maybe the next goalkeeper is not going to be as good. And if Sterling takes just as many shots in the next game, that's going to spell goals. And that's kind of the basic premise of how underlying stats work. I mean, that's kind of a very rough example, I suppose. And, as you can see from this table, Raheem Sterling, he does indeed lead the way over the period that I was kind of looking at. Now, I can either say to myself, everyone else is going for Bernardo, a lot of people are going for Gundogan instead as well, so those guys must be the right picks. Or I can follow the stats and say, even though these other players are getting FPL points, even though these other players are being recommended and hyped up by everyone, I believe that Raheem Sterling will score goals and get assists because he is clearly, based on the stats that I'm seeing in front of me, he is clearly being utilised in a way in this team that is tantamount to attacking returns. The stats can't lie. So I brought him in at a time where he was owned by less than 1% of players at my rank. He's got 3 goals in 3 games since then. He got a 14-point haul a couple of weeks ago, didn't he? And he's now owned by over 10% of players in my rank. We picked up a player before they became popular because we saw something we liked in the underlying stats, and we took a punt on a player who had really good underlying stats. that's kind of what we did. We picked up a player before anyone else really noticed that he could be a really good FPL asset. You can kind of say the same thing about Jared Bowen, for example, who had really, really good underlying stats at West Ham, had the best attacking underlying stats, and then he hauled last week. Wasn't too surprising because we already saw by the stats, it was coming. His stats look incredible. It's only a matter of time before he gets a really nice haul. For defenders and goalkeepers, you can look at things like expected goals conceded, shots conceded, save percentages, things like that. I know a lot of other people have uploaded videos on underlying stats recently, so I'm not going to deep dive into this today, but if you do want some recommendations on websites that give you tools to check the underlying stats, Fantasy Football Hub and Scouts, they have great tools if you're willing to pay for them. But you can also check out some free websites such as Understat, FBref, which I've used before. I subscribe to the paid ones, so they're not too bad as well. If anyone else has any other recommendations, I've not used many free ones in quite a long time now, so if anyone has any recommendations, I would absolutely love it if you guys could share that with the group in the comments. That would be awesome. So the other way to try and predict who is going to get points in the future is form players. Sometimes a player just hits a great run of form. Antonio at the beginning of the season, Reece James midway through the first half of the season, I guess, and Salah all season. With form players, it's really important that you jump on them as soon as possible, even if it seems a little bit risky. As I said earlier, the sooner you bring in these players during their run of form, the less people will own these players and the more valuable those players will be in terms of effective points that you gain. And the way to do this is to watch football games or game highlights, and if there's a player who wows you, think if this could be the start of something big. What should wow you is if the player is getting a lot of the ball, or maybe they're, every time they touch the ball, it seems to turn it into gold. Think about Emmanuel Dennis or Emil Smith Rowe. Every time the ball lands at their feet in a game, they look like scoring, right? Because they have the confidence to shoot, to play that key pass, whatever. FPL points don't really give a full representation of this. If a player scores a goal from a corner header, for example, or if the ball bounces off their bum and they didn't even notice it happening, this is not really a form player. You could probably better attribute this to a little bit of luck. Form is when you can see a player is hungry, always high up the pitch, is in dangerous positions off the ball, having that confidence to shoot or do something special. If a player shows a lot of that, even in just one single game, ask yourself, could this be the start of something special? And sometimes the answer will be yes. Take James Maddison in game week 13, for example. He scored a goal and got 2 assists in that game. And whilst a lot of people wrote him off as a one-game wonder or worried about his game time, I kind of decided, hey, you've got to be in it to win it, right? Let's take a gamble. I watched the game back. I saw that Maddison was dominating the game, decided that this is actually perhaps what Leicester need right now. And I think the chances of Maddison being rotated out the team, I think that's going to be fairly low. I also remembered from previous seasons that Maddison was a bit of a streaky player. At least that's how I remembered him being. So, he's one of those players who goes on these runs of insane runs of goals and assists, and then he disappears again. So I went on the Transfer Marks website to confirm this theory, looked at his stats from previous season, when did he go on streaks and then blank for a while, and that's exactly kind of what happened. And yes, pretty much a year ago to the day, Maddison had gone on a run where he was returning nearly every game before fading away after kind of 10 game weeks. So I decided, let's take a risk. Let's try and jump on Maddison now before everyone else catches on, before the run of form has even really begun. And since then, what do you know? Maddison has 3 goals and 3 assists in 5 games and 3 10-point hauls, 10-point or more hauls in that time as well. And if it wasn't for games being rescheduled in that time, I think Maddison could genuinely be an essential player right now. And, we kind of grabbed him first because we saw something we liked, and we decided to take a risk and act upon it rather than waiting to see what happened in future game weeks. And sometimes taking that risk really, really can pay off. And that's an example of one that did really pay off. I think the final point I want to make in this video is that it won't always work, and that's okay. You have to be okay with that when you're taking a lot of risks in your game, and being willing to take risks and pick differential players, I think, is a great way to play FPL. It's also an extremely fun way to play FPL. I can get excited about Raheem Sterling scoring a goal in a way I can't get excited about Salah scoring a goal, because if Salah scores, everyone in my mini league also has him captain, so everyone gains points at the same time. I've not really gained anything really in terms of FPL. Anyway, a Sterling goal makes me stand up and scream, annoy all of my neighbours, but sends me up the table as well. So it's exhilarating, but picking these kind of players only works if you're willing to accept that it won't always go right, and you have to accept that sometimes you are wrong, and that's okay. And I think this has kind of been a bigger learning point for me this season, between last season and this season. Before, if I picked a player, I would hold on to them and blindly say, I picked them for a reason, they will come good. I thought, stubbornly backing your own picks was good advice, when I think I was wrong there. I was really wrong about, I gave that advice to you guys last season, and I was wrong about that. I think letting go of your pride and selling a player that hasn't worked out is really, really important. The key is to not judge this based on FPL points scored, but kind of based on players' performance on the pitch and their underlying stats. Does your player look like they're actually lacking confidence? Are all of their shots really poor efforts? And Boomo, is the player, playing in a different position to where you expected? Has the role changed within the team? Have they had a significant drop off in stats? Have they only taken 2 shots in the last 2 games compared to 10 in the 2 before? These are kind of all indications that it's time to sell a player, and I think being willing to cut your losses is the only way to make this bold strategy work. And often I found in this season in particular, because I'm going for so many risky picks, very, very often I will sell a player literally 1 game week or 2 game weeks after I bought them in, and I have loads of people in the comments, loads of people on Twitter or whatever saying, "What, Dan? You're crazy. You're a hypocrite. What do you mean? You recommended this player 1 week and now they're a bad pick. What's going on there? You changed your mind so quickly. What's going on there?" I think that's okay. I genuinely think it's okay. I think that having that flexibility is amazing, and you can't just expect everything to go your way. You can't expect everything to go right. And literally, I'm ranked the highest I've ever been ranked since I've been playing FPL in my life. I'm ranked kind of 65th in the world as I make this video. And I can tell you, so many of my differential picks, my bold, risky picks, have gone wrong. So wrong. And, that's kind of all the proof you really need to say that you don't need all of them to go right. You don't need everything to go perfectly, because things don't go perfectly, and you can't demand too much of yourself. You're human. Don't let people call you out for changing your mind or going back on a decision. You're not a hypocrite. You're flexible. You're open-minded, and you have to have it within yourself to kind of be okay with getting things wrong. And if you're okay with getting things wrong, if you're willing to cut your losses as soon as possible, this kind of thing as works out. And maybe everything I'm saying in this video is completely wrong, but all I can do really is kind of share my experiences. And this is kind of what I found to be really awesome. And it's so relieving in a way to stop caring about what other people think in terms of selling players that you've previously backed, and or buying players that you've previously slandered. It's okay. It's fine. It's fine to change your mind. And if you're willing to be so fluid and so flexible, and not get pride get in the way of your FPL picks, it's honestly, it's like a weight lifted off your shoulder. It's so amazing, guys. So I can't recommend that enough. So yeah. I hope that with this kind of advice, this is going to help you become the envy of your mini leagues, help you shut out the noise, carve out your own path in many ways, become an FPL sage, and hopefully, with any luck, predict the future. And if you fail to predict the future, just sell the player, just get rid of the player, cut your losses, and move on and try and predict the future again. It seems to work, I think. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really do think, I really do hope that you found this helpful. I think this was a fairly useful video, and sometimes it's nice to do a kind of deep dive and kind of talk about kind of what has worked and what hasn't worked for me this season. And compare yourself to previous seasons as well, and kind of reflect on what you've kind of been doing in a season. And this video is not just for you guys, but also for me to kind of look back on and kind of see and kind of remind myself that this strategy is working at the time. Maybe in the future this kind of strategy won't work, and I maybe need to reference this video in the future and kind of see what's working and what's not working at different times. So I kind of, it's good to get a lot of my thoughts and what's going on in my brain out there as well, and get it on record, I suppose, of what I think the state of play in FPL is. And maybe you guys will have some very different opinions. Obviously luck plays a huge part of it, but I just kind of wanted to convince you that there is method behind the madness. It's not just all about picking random players and they so happen to score really well. Obviously, there is a degree of that. There was always a degree of luck, but you can I genuinely think you can predict the future in FPL, and you know, this is just kind of how I've been doing it. So yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. If you did enjoy this video, please do leave a like. I'd massively appreciate that, and do subscribe if you're new around here as well. Plenty of videos to come ahead of Game Week 22. Maybe you're watching this video in the future. Plenty of videos to come ahead of whatever game week it is right now when you're watching this video, I suppose. But there you go, guys. Thank you so much for watching once again, and I will see you later, mates. Bye bye.